Well, that's interesting because that's one of the things Trump and people supporting have been saying for years, that this open border flooding people is connected to sex trafficking. And he and others have been called just conspiracy theorist, crazy. This has nothing to do with it. But I mean, it's not saying every single person coming over the border is involved in this, but to what extent
Right.
do you think there's credible evidence that there is a connection between having a porous border and the rise in this activity?
Well, first of all, sex trafficking is a worldwide problem. Sex trafficking involves illegal immigration
Hmm.
per se.
Yes.
So if you open the borders to illegal immigration, aren't you opening the borders to sex trafficking?
Hmm.
And that's what's going on with not only children, but women who are being raped during their journey to the United States. The sexual abuse of women involved in the trafficking of illegal immigrants is well documented. So this is a horrific scandal. The Catholic Church is receiving hundreds of millions of dollars to facilitate
Mm.
the scandal. And then we have a pope who sits in the Vatican and says no one may set foot in Vatican
Right.
City without being arrested and facing a jail term of 1 to 5 years.
Mm.
Utter hypocrisy.
Well, do as I say, not as I do, is kind of the motto of his
That's the
pontificate.
liberal way. We have a liberal pope.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, it's sort of one level. So there's like you're getting paid, you have a financial interest in having lots of migrants and immigrants, so you can, get paid by the government to take care of them, even though your primary mission is salvation of souls, not running shelters. But there's even a darker element alleged, and there's an interesting article over on Substack by a guy named Gene Thomas Gamolka. And honestly, when I read this, it reminded me a lot of Michael Rose's book Goodbye Good Men, which is one of the most sickening books I've ever read. I honestly only got 80% through it because I was so just disgusted I couldn't read it, where he documents in the 80s and 90s the essentially sodomite infiltration of the American seminary system. Well, this guy basically takes that analysis to a new level and makes claims based on what he claims are victims who have come forward, that there was sort of a racket going on of US bishops and seminaries bringing in foreign seminarians, so taking advantage of loose immigration laws to bring them in and then essentially exploiting them for sexual exploitation. Why? Because they're vulnerable. So you're here, you have no right to be in the country. We're going to basically take advantage of you, and you have to keep your mouth shut so we can cover it up, or we ship you back to Poland or Colombia or some of the other countries. He alleges. So again, these are allegations. But if this turned out to be true, would it be shocking to you that the U.S. hierarchy was involved in such activity?
Not at all. I recall the so-called pedophile summit of 2000 in Rome, which I attended as a journalist.
Hmm.
And I posed the question to Wilton Gregory at the time in the little auditorium where the press was gathered to hear their explanation for the obvious infiltration of homosexuals into the Catholic hierarchy. And this answer that he gave appeared in the New York Times. And he said something like, it's a constant struggle to keep homosexuals from being the majority of the American clergy. This is what Wilton Gregory admitted before the world at a
Yeah.
press event in response to the question that I posed to him. Because the question was, when are you going to enforce the Vatican guideline from the 1960s
Right.
that people who merely display effeminacy should not be admitted to the seminary because of the problem that would develop if they're living with other men? So that was his answer. And we know now that there's a widespread problem in the church with the infiltration of homosexuals, and that we have the lavender mafia in the church,
Hmm.
and that Francis seems to be totally devoted to facilitating their operations within the church. He's been nothing less than the greatest gift the gay movement, so-called, in the church has had in its entire bimillennial history.
Hmm.
Look at who he's appointing to the Vatican bureaucracy.
Yeah. Well, look at the Rupna case for one. I mean,
Yeah.
someone who's excommunicated and punished by his own bureaucracy, and like literally minutes later, he revokes it all and invites the guy to give a preach a retreat in the Vatican. Yeah.
Yep. Well, yeah, the cardinal he appointed as head, Cardinal Zuppi,
Yes.
head of the Italian Episcopal Conference, Cardinal Zuppi, named president of the conference by Pope Francis. He's openly in the pro-LGBTQ camp. And what they're trying to do is normalize activity that even the Catechism of the Catholic Church, promulgated by John Paul II, calls an act of grave depravity.
Yes.
That's still the teaching of the Church. It always will be the teaching of the Church, because this is a matter of natural law that cannot be altered by any kind of papal policy or change in attitudes reflecting the total moral decomposition of what is left of our civilization. I mean, sodomy is contrary to nature.